Good morning everyone, good afternoon and good evening. Today is Safety Thursday. Why is this Safety Thursday? Because we are looking at the announced, at this point, new class talent for Dragonflight that is revealed every time we get, by this point, into a new reset, where we also get a new build of the Alpha of Dragonflight, which so far, all the 5 different builds have given us a new set of class talents, and this time, as it was quite easily predictable, just as I did, the class in question was Warlock. So, what is left now to be shown is Demon Hunter and Monk. They are the last two to be revealed to the players, but for now, we have gotten the Warlock talents. Now, I would define these Warlock talents as the most standard, the most basic, the most safe vanilla of all talents. So you can take this both in the good way or in the wrong way. You can take this as a nice thing because you already liked the way the Warlock specs worked, the way the Warlock specs played, and there is not going to be any major overhauls to any of the 3 specs of Warlock. There is not going to be any major change in the way you play, particularly for Destruction and Demonology. Affliction is the more daring one. It has a few changes here and there, but out of all of the classes we have seen, they are the talents that remain the closest to Shadowlands talents, essentially, to the way the specs work already. They are nice, they are what you would expect, but they are not at the same time that exciting, I would say. There isn't really that many things that are going to wow you or even excite you to play. When you look at the general talent tree, so the Warlock tree that everyone gets access to, the first thing to point out of this entire tree is this thing right here. Spell lock, because Warlock is now getting their interrupt, 24-second interrupt on their general talent tree, meaning all Warlocks will now have an interrupt independent of their pet. Now, what is also interesting to point out is that at the moment, at the very least in the Alpha, the Felguard of the Demonology Warlock still has access to the Axtos 45-second cooldown interrupt. So if this were to continue in Dragonflight, then specs like Demo would have essentially a double interrupt available to them. Also, since Spelllock has now been taken away from the Fell Hunter now has a Purge. An offensive Purge Dispel, just like Demon Hunter has, just like Shaman has. This is one of the main news about the general Warlock tree. The other main news is that there is one Covenant ability. As we have now seen at this point, it's not a surprise that Blizzard usually has put 1 to 2 different Covenant ability options in the talent trees for the specs in Dragonflight, and for the case of Warlock, it's going to be Decimating Bolt for the general Warlock tree. That is the only one that survives. We are going to see one more down the line, but at the very least, available to all Warlocks, you have Decimating Bolt. Outside of these 2 news, so outside of Decimating Bolt and outside of your general interrupt, there is the only new one, which is Summon Jailer. Of course, I don't think this is going to be the final name of the talent. Summon Jailer summons a jailer that consumes all tormented souls you have collected, blasting nearby enemies for 100% spell power chaos damage every 1 second for each tormented soul consumed. You collect tormented souls from each target you kill and occasionally escape souls you previously collected. So this is still a work in progress. We still don't quite know how this is going to work. Is it an ability? Is it a passive? What's the cooldown, etc, etc? We still don't know much, but at the very least there is something new. Because most of the other stuff is just returning things, not even that surprising in the way they open up different opportunities for you. You do have the opportunity to take Burning Rush now as one of your base starting talent, and Dark Pact, which were previously in the same talent row. So that's one new thing you can do as a Warlock. Another of the new things, although this one is purely for utility type of stuff, is going to be Soulburn. It's an ability that will cost you 1 soul shard and will empower one of your next utility abilities like Teleport, like Gateway, Drain Life, Health Funnel, or Hellstone. Of these ones, definitely the standout one is going to be the Hellstone, because it's going to increase the healing of your Hellstone by 30%, but more importantly, increase your maximum health by 20% for 12 seconds. So it also gives you basically a rallying cry whenever you use your Hellstone. Most of the other things in here, from the demonic circle to Shadow Fury to other things like the choice between Howl of Terror and Mortal Coil, which is the same as the one in your talents, your banish. Most other stuff is just returning effects, returning passives and abilities you already had without too many surprises, without too many changes, too many things that unlock your gameplay. But at the end of the day, you can still be hopeful because this is just the general Warlock 3. So it doesn't have too many news, but even then, as I said, it's quite safe, it's quite standard, it's quite vanilla. It's not really bad per se. You do have some decent changes here and there, some extra defensive, extra power to your healthstone, etc, etc. It's okay. The thing that gets a little bit more disappointing is when you enter the specific trees, so the spec trees, the ones that matter basically in the end. We start with the more changed of the talent options, which is the one for Affliction Warlock, because it does have a handful of choices, a handful of different effects that are worth going over. Number one, let's just start by saying that Affliction is the only one of the 3 specs that gets access to a second Covenant ability, because this one is Soul Rot. Of course, Soul Rot is definitely more thematic for Affliction than for Destruction or Demo, so sure, Soul Rot is here. It also gets a smaller-ish version of its Covenant legendary. Decaying Soul Satchel is also here. But what is interesting is the few amount of changes happening to this tree. You do have Soul Swap, which applies your trio of dots to a target instantly. That's quite nice for target swapping as an Affliction Warlock. It saves you a whole bunch of GCDs. And then Deathbolt. Deathbolt is a very interesting ability because it is now your second spender after Malefic Rapture, and that's that's a massive change compared to how Affliction has been playing since the introduction of Malefic Rapture. It also, I'm sure, perhaps to some of you, certainly for me when I tried it, it felt definitely weird to use Malefic Rapture on single target. It just doesn't feel like a single target ability. It just feels much more as an AoE ability. Instead, now you have the option to focus more on single target with Deathbolt, because Deathbolt is going to accumulate 50% of the remaining damage of all of your dots on the target and then deal that damage over 3 seconds. You do also have empowering options after Deathbolt with Death Dealer, which gives you a chance whenever you spend soul shards to make your next Deathbolt have no cost and be instacast, which is nice because Deathbolt has a default 30-second cooldown. And the last one is Pact of the Nathrazim, which makes your Deathbolt extend the damage over time effects on your target by 4 seconds before applying the damage, so it makes it even stronger. It's a nice change already compared to how Affliction plays, going away a little bit from the pure Malefic Rapture spam into a more single target focused option. Amongst the option, of course, you still have plenty of synergy with doing more Malefic Rapture damage, or with making it easier for you to spam Malefic Rapture. You can, for example, increase the damage of Malefic Rapture by up to 25%, and each cast is going to extend the dots on your targets by 2 seconds. You also can get Calamitous Crescendo, which makes having all of the dots active on a target make your Shadowbolt or Drain Soul have a chance to make your next Malefic Rapture cost no shards and cast instantly. So even though you get the option of Deathbolt, it's not that Malefic Rapture is losing its value in Dragonflight. It is still clearly the option for AoE damage. It's just good that now you have another option for better, stronger single target damage. You also have better options for target swapping more quickly. Not to mention the second to last talent row of Affliction gets completely dismantled, because now you have Haunt right here, you have Grimoire of Sacrifice right here, and you have Shadow Embrace right here. So you can now take all 3 of them at the same time, but particularly Haunt. Not only just Haunt itself, but also its empowerments. Your Seize Vitality to make Haunt deal 20% more damage, and then healing you for all the damage it did when it comes back to you, and Haunted Soul, which makes your Haunt spell increase the damage of your damage over time effects to all targets by 20% while active. And we can finish with a choice of Wrath of Consumption, which is a legendary, another legendary, this time for dot damage, killing multiple enemies, giving you stacking haste, the same type of legendary we have right now in Shadowlands, and your synergy to your bigger cooldown, Summon Dark Lair. Not just the damage increase increase based on how many dots you have active stacking up over time, or the Wilfred Sigil to reduce the cooldown of your Summon Darkler per soul shard spent. So I thought that overall this one was the more even, the more balanced, the more diverse of the talent trees. For Warlock, it does have a few options to change your playstyle. You have the more focused single target options with Deathbolt and even Haunt. You have the AoE side with Malefic Rapture. It does seem like it's more clear in what you want to do as an Affliction Warlock, and at the very least slightly more diverse than what you have now, than what you have been doing now in Shadowlands. Where it gets a little bit more boring is in the other two specs, Destro and Demo. What they do is very few changes to both of them. Your final part, your final bracket of talents where you might see some very cool changes is quite kind of missing for both of them. Demo to the end gets the meme. Let's just see if this expansion, this will manage not to be a meme. The meme of Nether Portal and of Summon Demonic Tyrant, of course. Demonic Tyrant does get empowered by giving you 3 shards instantly to help with your ramp as soon as you summon the Tyrant, and with the option of Wilfred Sigil to reduce its cooldown, or Demonic Consumption, which is the health stealing talent that usually you always take when you're going for a Tyrant build. The only new thing across all of this is all this for me, which is essentially giving a more straightforward and consistent AoE to your Felguard by making your Felguard's basic attacks deal damage to all nearby enemies and attack 50% faster. And that's the main thing, that's the main change to this entire tree of Demo. Most of the stuff is going to be passive, as you can see here. Circles, there is a whole lot of circles. It's the circliest of all talent trees, the one of Demo. You can see there are also quite few options. You have the option between Summon Vilefin and Soul Strike, and the option between the Bombers, the Bat Bombers, and Demonic Strength. And then at the end, the one between Demonic Consumption and Wilfred Sigil. The rest is a whole bunch of circles, because it's just going to be passive. It's going to be passive damage over returning passives like the Forces of the Horn Nightmare to give your Hand of Gul'dan a chance to double hit, or more Felguard damage, or guess what? More Felguard damage, or guess what? More Felguard damage, or guess what? More Felguard damage, etc, etc. So, not too many changes for Demo whatsoever. You take your usual stuff from your Dreadstalkers to your Demon Bolt to your Implosion to your Grimoire Felguard, and then you have back to your Tyrant. So not too many changes for Demo. The same situation can be said for Destruction. I think this is worse than Demo, because even though there aren't that many changes, the spec, the rotation of Demonology is engaging enough and can be, I don't want to say complicated, but can be complex, can be satisfying to pull off, satisfying to get out all of your pets, then dump out the Tyrant, etc, etc. So it doesn't necessarily need that many overhauls in Dragonflight. You know, perhaps even just a few of these passives, like even the Power Siphon addition to sacrificing Wild Imps in exchange of Demonic Cores to increase the damage of your Demon Bolt. Perhaps even just a few of these things can just smoothen out the rotation and keep it engaging, as it already is in Shadowlands. But Destro kind of isn't. You know, Destro has been this 2-button bot for a long time. A few changes would have been welcome, you know, perhaps moving away from this degenerate Rain of Fire spam in AoE or Chaos Bolt spam in single target would have been welcome, you know, would have been a nice change of pace for the way Destruction plays. Instead, we don't really get too many new things for Destruction. Once again, towards the end of your talent tree, you get your Infernal and you get your Ritual of Ruin, which is essentially your tier set bonus, except it's been nerfed. Now it's not instacast, and it's not 10 soul shards spent. Now it's 15 soul shards spent to make your next Chaos Bolt or Rain of Fire be 50% faster to cast. So it's a significantly nerfed version of your tier set. After this, you can slightly increase it to make it less worse, but still worse than your tier set, so it costs 13 soul shards to proc the effect instead of 15, and Chaos Bolt and Rain of Fire increase the damage of your next 2 Incinerates by 15% stack stacking up 4 times. And lastly, Avatar of Destruction. When Chaos Bolt or Rain of Fire consumes a charge of Ritual of Ruin, you summon a Blasphemy for 8 seconds. The other part of your tier set. So you have this side with your tier set, you have this side with your Infernal and a buff with your Infernal to make your spenders cost slightly less, another buff to your Infernal to increase the damage of its Immolation aura, and lastly the option between Reign of Chaos, the much discussed OP talent which created this entire thing with Reign of Fire AoE of Destruction, and again Wilfred's Sigil for the cooldown reduction. So these are basically your two choices. Empower your Infernal just like you have been empowering it normally, or empower your 4-piece, 2-piece set bonus from the Sepulchre tier of Shadowlands. Those are the two main final points of Destro, which are exactly the same thing you have been playing with right now. Do you have hope for the one in the middle? Well, the one in the middle makes you generate more soul shards with Incinerate. It gives you more stacking damage the more you spam the same spell, which is kind of the boring playstyle I would like to see Destruction move away from. And lastly, you have Chaos Incarnate, which makes your Chaos Bolt, Rain of Fire and Shadowburn always gain maximum benefit from your mastery, which is also quite nice, of course, you know, basically trying to game the RNG of Destruction, but overall. But beyond this nice little thing here, most of this stuff are things you already have and that you already played with. Most of the other stuff is quite unimpressive. You can get back your Rain of Fire with the choice between Inferno and Cataclysm, like right now, the choice between Reverse Entropy and Infernal Combustion, like right now. Take back your Shadowburn with the Shadowburn improvement, get back, if you ever played it, Channel Demon Fire with the Channel Demon Fire improvement. Backlash comes back. Again, you have your Soulfire talent with the Soulfire empowerment. More talents being spread around the tree, like Eradication, now making it all the way towards almost the top of the tree rather than one of the entry-level talents like right now. The only slight change you can find in this tree for Destro is the alternative Blizzard has decided to give to Destruction. I think they point this out in their manifesto about an alternative to Havoc. We are exploring an alternative called Mayhem. It's a passive that gives your single target spells a chance to deal 60% of its damage to a random nearby target. The goal with this talent is to give a more passive 2-target option for players who would like to opt out of Havoc gameplay. I find this funny because, you know, you already have like 3 buttons for Destruction, and now they opt to take away one of the few things you have to think about when you're trying to damage 2 targets. The change in question is this one right here, going from an ability that you have to enable yourself like Havoc to a passive effect, and then you have the improvement right here. Pandemonium makes Havoc last 3 seconds longer, or Mayhem having a 10% additional chance to trigger, and then Cry Havoc makes your Chaos Bolt duplicated by either Mayhem or Havoc explode, dealing who knows how much damage to targets within 8 yards, so splash even more AoE damage. And then finish off the empowerment with Rolling Havoc. Each time your spells duplicate to a Havoc target, gain 1% damage for 8 seconds, stacks up to 10 times. This is a far cry to the Azerite trait that used to be used in BFA that was incredibly powerful. This one is just a pale imitation compared to what it was back then. Overall, I would say Destruction is perhaps the least exciting out of the 3. As I said, Affliction at the very least gets some possible changes and options with the Deathbolt and a few other nice additions, the returning of Soul Rot, which is quite thematic for them. Demo doesn't get as many changes, but it does compound, it does build upon a rotation which is already quite enjoyable. If you like to play around with pets and to not do that much damage yourself, the rotation is quite satisfying to pull off. The main disappointment lays in Destruction, because I just find the general idea of building up soul shards with Incinerate and then spam just Chaos Bolt on single target or 2 targets, and then the opposite with spamming Rain of Fire in multi-target options is just quite disappointing. I wished to see something different, perhaps add in some way Channel Demon Fire as a legitimate spender, add a few other ways to generate soul shards other than spamming Incinerate, you know, a few of these things added to the rotation of destruction, which doesn't seem to be happening at the moment. Of course, there are going to be plenty of players who already enjoy their Warlock destruction rotation. We are going to leave them in their mental asylum where they reside, but I was just wishing for a few more changes for Destro. Perhaps it's even a decision, a conscious decision from Blizzard, because demo is quite more complex. It requires juggling around quite a few more things and timings. Perhaps it's always been one of the decisions of Blizzard to just keep destruction more simple as a counter to demo. Maybe that's why they are continuing down this road for destruction. But for today, for this Thursday, I believe, this is all we have available for the talent reveal of this week. Of course, it's gonna be left to be seen if next week we get both Demon Hunter and Monk at the same time, or if it's just gonna be one, which seems to be now, by the way, based on the data mining done. It seems to be Monk. It seems that Demon Hunter will be the last one of the classes left to be shown their talents. That being said, it's time to leave. I have to go out, I have to run some errands, and then I have to come back, work out, and then I have to start raiding in this week's raid, which is gonna be Sanctum. So I'm gonna leave you guys for today. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of my Patreon supporters. You are helping me continue to provide you with content, even now that we are getting busier and busier in the midst of Dragonflight updates. It's nice to know that I have the support of my patrons as I continue to produce content. That being said, you can also support me by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel. That would also be quite helpful. The comments for today are going to be obviously about the talents of Warlocks. You know, I'm calling any of the Warlock mains in here to tell me how do you feel, your first reaction, your first impression of these Warlock talents. If you are perhaps on the opposite spectrum, if perhaps you just enjoyed a lot of these talent options for reasons that I might have missed, I would be glad, I would be happy to read your reasoning behind the excitement of these Warlock talents. And then lastly, of course, you can also follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon down at these two links. Subscription which will give you access as usual to my Discord server. With this being said, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, oh man, these scumbags. I tried to leave my mobile phone carrier for a different one because I was sick of their shit, and 2 days after the request they sent me 50 gigabytes of traffic every month for free for a year. Shameless.